China stuns the market with monster corn purchases. World grain markets are struggling to make sense of a monster corn buying spree from China. The Asian giant ramped up its buying program from the U.S., taking hold of 5.8 million tons of corn last week, including a huge 2.1 million tons on Friday alone. Market analyst Andrew Whitelaw, Thomas Elder Markets, said he believed the last time there had been such high level of buying in such a small time frame was back in 1972 during the so-called grain robbery, when the Soviet Union bought large stocks of U.S. grain and caused the markets to soar. Are we witnessing this again? The great grain robbery of 2021? Well, let's go back. The great grain robbery was not a real robbery, but it was a major turning point in the history of agricultural monitoring. In 1972, the U.S. and the USSR were deep in the middle of the Cold War. But that did not stop the daily business of trade among nations. In fact, given the dicey agricultural policies and poor weather of the Soviet breadbasket, crop failure was not unusual. Soviet agricultural trade representatives often turned to the foreign commodities market to make up for the difference. And therein lies the great grain robbery. In July of 1972, the Russians began buying up foreign wheat, purchasing 10 million tons from the U.S. brokers by August. Richard E. Mooney's economic analysis in 1975 issue of the New York Times states that despite receiving reports of crop failures in the Soviet Union and elsewhere, the U.S. government failed to appreciate the significance of the global grain shortage and the effect it might have on the U.S. economy. As federal grain subsidies continued to favor bargains for the Soviets buying American wheat, the price of domestic grain rose sharply, causing a food price crisis back home. According to John A. Schnittker, in a 1973 paper for the Brookings Institute, the U.S. government wasted $300 million in public funds and lost the same amount in potential revenue by unwittingly subsidizing the Russian wheat purchases. And we're doing the same right now. As it turned out, the shortage in Russia was part of a worldwide shortage in grain production that almost wiped out the international stockpiles. Clifton Luttrell wrote in the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis Review in 1973 that the U.S. government did not recognize this was happening because the government did not have the big picture view of agricultural output worldwide. They don't have the big picture view of climate change. We know that. The great climate robbery has been occurring for decades. And so why would we trust the government that has destroyed small businesses, locked us down, is now mandating face mask testing and vaccines? Now, at this point, sophisticated agricultural monitoring was only in its infancy, and we're way better today. According to Gary Weir of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, despite using satellites to photograph grain-growing areas, the resolution was not clear enough to reveal much information on the health of crops, leaving the probable outcomes of Russian harvests opaque to the U.S. intelligence. Give me a break. In an article in Earth Imaging Journal, Weir describes how research done in the 1960s on non-photographic sensors had led to the development of radar technology, as well as the recognition of the usefulness of shorter infrared wavelengths. Camouflage experts studied infrared because that portion of the light spectrum reflects from plants, and this same quality made infrared a potentially useful tool in discerning the health and condition of crops. Now, we have all that technology today, but what's going on? That's what people are asking. Is China buying up all the grain in the new great grain robbery? Back then, at the same time, scientists at NASA had just launched Landsat-1 with the aim of contributing to better management of Earth's resources. NASA teamed up with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is now NOAA, the biggest fraudsters on the climate platform, to develop crop production forecasts through satellite monitoring. Out of the unsettling agricultural and economic events of 1972, the beginnings of a robust agricultural monitoring program were born. And yet, we are sitting during the great grain robbery of 2021 as China stuns the market with monster corn purchases. What does it all mean? Well, back in 72, the great grain robbery was the purchase of 10 million short tons of grain, mostly wheat and corn, from the U.S. by the Soviet Union at cheaper than normal prices, which caused the global grain prices to soar. Crop shortfalls in 1971 and 72 forced the Soviet Union to look abroad for grain, hoping to prevent famine or other crises. Soviet negotiators worked out a deal to buy the grain on credit, but quickly exceeded their credit limit. American negotiators did not realize that both the Soviets and the world grain markets had suffered shortfalls, and thus subsidized the purchase. The strategy backfired and intensified the crisis, and global food prices rose 30%. Hello, that's a boom to what's going on right now, the great grain robbery of 2021. Predictably, corn markets have soared with the Chicago Board of Trade March contracts hitting the level highest for 7 years at $5.54 a bushel. Same thing is happening now. There are some surprises that prices have not risen even further given the scale of the sales. Toby Gorey, Commonwealth Bank commodities analyst, said there was still a lot of unknowns surrounding the sales, and this would be something the market was looking at. Are you willing to look at the market after we know the facts and history repeats itself time and time again? Well, probably not. The mainstream media is going to push the narrative that they're paid for. And we as, well, the useless eaters will suffer from the great grain robbery of 2021. What say you? We just laid it down like a boom to knowledge. Like a blink of the boom to knowledge. Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. When world governments are now jockeying for position in the global cabal that will destroy the empire and reset the world. The global reset is upon us. How will you react? 50 years after the last great grain robbery, we're being robbed again. And it's not Russia, but what's the difference from communist China? Same playbook, same plan, same strategy. The great grain robbery of 2021 is ongoing, and it's anyone's guess where it's going. Be safe. We love you. And that's a boom. Share this with like-minded people. Click on one of the boxes to gain more knowledge. And thanks to all of our one-time donors, our Patreons, and the patriots that share this information with others. Without you, this alternative media source would not be possible. Period.